Hi, today I'd like to talk about choosing to live knowing that half of us will be dead in about 25 years.
Hell yeah, happy Thursday, everybody. It is hump day. Oh, wait, sorry, no. Yesterday was hump day, which means it's almost Friday, which means it's essentially the weekend. Happy weekend. Congrats. You made it. Hello and welcome to, or welcome back to Colonial Outcast, the anti-imperialist podcast your eco-terrorist hating uncle will absolutely loathe. Actually, he might not if his retirement property just got eminent domained by a data center. But anyways, we are checking off all the terrorist ideology boxes on this show according to the Trump administration's national security policy, because we're on the anti-capitalism list, we're on the Antifa list, the Islamism list, and now, finally, the eco-terrorism list. The quadfecta has been achieved, y'all, and we couldn't do it without your support. Because, you know, if you resist Nestle privatizing water, the privatization of public parks and lands, burning to death in a wildfire, dying of thirst, or subsisting as a climate refugee in a FEMA camp, you have dangerous eco-radical beliefs. And honestly, the horrifying research I did for this episode might turn me into an environmental activist, but from a geopolitical or military position, because things are going to get wild, right? States will collapse, wars will happen, gone will be the days of carrier strike groups or even drones as global supply chains break down, and all the evangelicals will be absolutely stoked seeing that the end is nigh as plague, famine, and wars happen, right? Like, are going to be crisis cults popping up everywhere, like UFO cults, AI machine god cults. And then, you know, there's some maximalist projections that 4 billion people could die in 20 to 30 years. We're going to talk about that because that seems a little insane with someone who's knowledgeable on the subject. And the bottom line is that we here at RFEmedia, after the internet collapses, we will still be transmitting this podcast in our Thursday live stream if we live from the Great Lakes region of the continental United States. So get in on the ground floor and subscribe to RFEmedia.com, either for free, so you get no ads, or for $5 a month, a ton of exclusive content. Okay, apocalypse plug over. How we doing?
Good,
Mark?
good. Just one more plug. Don't forget, subscribe to the Black Panther newspaper, the first issue in 46 years. And it brings in revenue for the Black Panther Party for their organizing efforts and beyond. But yeah, I like how we started off with positivity with that positive video. We'll be dead in 25 years. Means live life to the fullest, buddy.
Yeah,
starting with the revolution. If we're gonna die in 25 years, why not just kick off the revolution right now? What do we got to lose?
Those projections are so maximalist, though. Yeah, you know, if we're all gonna die by 2050, you know, may as well bring back YOLO as well.
YOLO,
or not. Actually, don't. Oh my God. I've never been the biggest environmental activist or commentator. I've always mentioned it, but it's not like my niche. It's not my lane, right? But I'm going to have to study my ass off to add it to my repertoire, because like maybe take some classes on it at like ACC for like, we're in an age of like climate collapse or change, and geopolitics around it are going to get absolutely insane. You know, climate breakdown will reshape global power by shifting resource competition from fossil fuels to green tech minerals, probably, and trigger cross-border migration, strain food and water security, and fracture international cooperation into literal regional blocks, and, it will be more isolated world of militarized climate fortresses with mass migration movements dying out in the hinterlands. Also, that might not happen, or it might look different. And, one of the big factors of whether or not it's going to happen is like, what do we as humans do, right? And that's one of the big, inputs that we really can't put into any sort of prediction models. And that's why there's so much contention about what this actually looks like. And we are going to discuss it all here today with an excellent guest. But first, we must play our Dude Bro title sequence to get you jazzed up for the Water Wars. I feel like environmental activists, like I know a few, I was on the flotilla with Greta and stuff, and they just all really get shoehorned into the Cassandra archetype, which represents the pain of seeing the truth clearly and knowing an impending disaster, but being dismissed, mocked, or disbelieved by others. You know, coming from the Greek myths surrounding the tales of the Iliad, where the Trojan princess Cassandra was cursed by Apollo so that her true prophecies were never believed. For the scions of Troy sensed that doom was upon them, but they still could not imagine the shattering reality of their world in apocalyptic flames. So when unable to confront mass death or the potential of systemic collapse, pretend like it isn't coming anytime soon. Anyways, this is going to be fun because today we are joined by a friend of the show, Michael Mezzatesta, a storyteller working at the intersection of economics, climate, and culture. His work reaches tens of millions of viewers each month and is recognized for making complex economic and climate issues accessible to a mainstream audience. He has an economics degree from my show notes I put Standoff University, but Stanford University, and he champions a post-capitalist world. He is the host of the Better Future podcast. Sorry, he has an economics degree from Stanford. He's the host of the Better Future podcast, links for which are in the description, and he has a lot of great guests, so definitely check it out. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, and sorry about that long ass intro, including Greek mythology. Apologize for that on behalf of the other co-host.
All good, guys. Thanks for having me on. And Greg said I have some good guests on my podcast that includes Greg himself. So only the best. Better Future podcast.
Yeah. So basically, when I was on in March, to your podcast, you're kind of shocked when I talked about like evangelicals and their apocalyptic vision of the future and how like they don't really care about conservationism as much because they think the world has a finite end to it. And so like, what's the point? But also if like famines and wars and mass migration happens, it means Jesus is coming soon.
Yeah, that blew my mind. I did not know about the evangelical story of the future and how it affects U.S. military decisions. And the fact that the U.S. military is filled with evangelicals, that was all new to me. So appreciated you shining a light on that for me. But it freaked me out a little bit, to be honest.
And just to give you an idea of what evangelicals believe on the environment, they believe that like a third of all the fish will die and get poisoned. A third, like all the trees are going to get burned up. But it's a beautiful story because Jesus is coming back. So they literally celebrate the destruction of the environment.
It's a climate thing too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I thought it was just about war in the Middle East, but this ties in with climate change as well.
No, because the four horsemen of the apocalypse, like war, famine, plague, like
destruction of the environment. Yeah.
So like I'm in Texas where they're like literally putting fracking water into like drinking sources and like really just the worst kind of forever chemicals going into the groundwater, and they don't care. They literally don't. It's not just about profit maximization. It's an ideological cult. And they are in positions of power, and it just absolutely sucks.
And by the way, great for profit maximization.
Oh yes, I mean, look, these apocalypse maxers, these end times maxers, or whatever you want to call them, they are great stooges for capitalist accumulation.
Absolutely, that's what's so uncanny about it. It's like someone designed an ideology that would just fit perfectly into the tech billionaire oligarchs' plans for using the Earth for all of its resources and escaping to Mars as quickly as possible.
Or Argentina. Yeah, because
it was hard work. It was hard work though. Developing that ideology was not easy. They had to bring in a lot of pastors, a lot of theologians. They had to rewrite a lot of books and put out a lot of movies like what do you call it? Left Behind. So it was hard work. Let's give them credit for that.
I just think that like it is kind of like an insane ideology too, but like one of the things that really freaked me out growing up here in Texas, which is kind of like the heartland of Christian evangelical Zionism, was they have all these arguments, or they did when I was like 11 years old, after like Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth came out, and that was like one of the first like mass environmentalist movies that people actually watched. They had talking points to debunk the climate change argument while actively believing that the climate was changing and knowing it was. Because they're waging an information war to just bring on the end times, which means we can't do anything to combat climate change.
And it makes it. I mean, yeah, they try to politicize it in a way that makes it seem like climate activists have our own best interests in mind, in the same way that they're protecting their self-interest. And it's like there's no self-interest in being a climate activist. And that's what frustrates me so much. You mentioned Greta in the intro. Like, people are like, oh, she must be getting paid to spread this globalist propaganda. It's like there is no money in saying that the global economy is going to cause irrevocable climate collapse. Like, there's no corporation that's funding that message. And I don't understand the claims of profit seeking and money grabbing for the climate activist movement, when ultimately the message that we're trying to spread is inherently anti-capitalist. I know we're going to get into that, but
Yeah.
it boggles the mind that they've put climate activism into this kind of bucket, especially the Fox News pundits and stuff, saying that they're just trying to make money for themselves. It's like this is an anti-business message. Unfortunately, we need to find a way to steer the ship in a different direction. And some would say that business can be a part of the solution, but I think I've researched this pretty deeply, and I've come to the conclusion that this is the entire economy that we're kind of up against here.
Yeah, so right now, even the disengaged layman citizen knows that something is wrong, right? Water is all of a sudden an issue. Europe is roasting this summer, and wildfires are seeming to crop up all over the global north. Obviously, the typical Westerner doesn't really pay attention to global south issues, which has it way worse, but now it's happening here. We've got our infrastructure being in the existence of our cities. They're kind of based off these old climate models that no longer exist as seas are rising. Global warming has doubled in a decade. The ocean is heating and becoming acidified. Soon there will be only bleached and dead reefs. The poles are melting, and the new glacial waterways are becoming the next theater of great power conflict. And it's just an entire feedback loop the more and more I research this, because the ice caps are melting, all this ancient permafrost are also going to melt and release methane and greenhouse gases, which is again going to cause a feedback loop where it only gets hotter and hotter and hotter. So all that seems bad, and it seems worse. Looking at worst case projections, a report by the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries and the University of Exeter warns that if global heating hits 3 degrees Celsius or more by 2050, it could lead to more than 4 billion deaths due to systemic collapse, extreme weather, and resource scarcity. That seems like an extreme projection, and I have heard other people saying we can turn this whole thing around. That seems a little crazy. So where do you kind of stand on all this?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, we are absolutely still headed in the wrong direction. People this summer have been talking about the heat waves and the mass death that we've seen across the world due to the rising temperatures and the frequency of heat waves that we're seeing really hit hard this summer. And people are saying, "Oh, this is, I guess, the new normal." It's not the new normal. This is the coolest summer we're going to have in the next 10 years potentially. You know what I mean? Things are going in a warmer and warmer direction. So I don't think that people really understand that this is just we're going in a certain direction, and it's not like it stopped here. The thing that we need to do to prevent that from happening, and I do believe that there's still time to fix this. I really do believe that we still can turn the ship around, but it's not going back to where we were before. We are in a new era of Earth systems. They call it the Anthropocene, this new Earth system that has been created because of human activity, right? And even if we're able to reduce emissions, restore biodiversity, restore ecosystems, the world is still going to look very different than the world that we grew up in. There's just no going back. Now, I do think that people need to understand what's at risk here, and understand that this is just this is a summer that we will remember as a relatively tepid and cool one if things stay on the current pace. That said, it doesn't need to be awful. We don't need to reach those projections that you read that said that half the global economy is going to be wiped out and half the global population is going to be at risk of losing their life. That's not a foregone conclusion, and everything that we can do to steer the ship in a better direction starting now is worth the effort, right? And so that's kind of where I try to sit. Is things look like we're going in a really bad direction, but how do we turn and bend the curve towards something better? But there's no going back.
Yeah. There is no going back, but nobody outside of like social media or like online forums or interpersonal relationships is talking about it because like most people don't know how depleted a lot of these water tables and water basins are, and the only way people are actually seeing what's happening is through social media.
This is the other Twin Lakes. This is the other one, and she doesn't have any water. She has no water. I don't really know how to process this. I heard about this on TikTok, but I thought the girl that made the video was exaggerating. And now that I'm on this side of Twin Lakes, I'm on the Twin Lakes side, closer to Independence Pass. I knew the water levels were going to be low, but this isn't low. This is empty. This is empty.
Yeah, I mean that's really how people are like getting like information these days. Like I'm running in Central Texas, and like no news is covering like how this district in Central Texas is getting absolutely steamrolled by data centers, high transmission power lines, poisoning the water. Like there's no water sovereignty, and nothing's being reported on. The only way we're finding out about this stuff is through like old conservative moms Facebook groups hosting like teach-ins and stuff. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, one of the videos I saw, which blew my mind, was the Mississippi River drying up. Right now, when I thought of the Mississippi River growing up, the mighty Mississippi, I'm like, there's no way that's ever going to dry up. But now it's getting hard for them to navigate, and I don't know if it's the case. Like, I can't find any good information on it. When I try to research it, like the Mississippi River, it's literally like right there, it cuts the country in half. How am I not able to get accurate information about a giant river cutting through the U.S.?
The Colorado River too is starting to dry up, and there's a little bit more attention on that, but not nearly enough. And someone's got to find the water to cool those data centers in Central Texas, Greg. So,
you guys may have heard of the other giant river, one of the other giant
Rio
Great
Grande?
American. Well, we're not calling it the Rio Grande anymore. We're calling it the Rio Sand now. So that's good.
Oh God, I didn't know that.
This is depressing stuff, guys. And I agree. It's the problem with climate change in general, right? Is that it's very difficult for the human brain to really even understand what's going on because we are not as monkeys with big brains really like designed to understand the global system. And it's part of why climate science has always had a hard time getting through to people, is because it's like, the entire Earth is just not something that as a system we can really comprehend. But these snapshots we're starting to see, these heat waves that kill thousands of people in France, these floods that absolutely devastate Pakistan, the Colorado River drying up, like you see snippets of it and you're like, oh my gosh, you start to develop a picture of what the entire world looks like. And it's not good. It's not good. And unfortunately, this is about 30, 40 years after people started sounding the alarm bell, and really 50 years. I mean, it was really in the 70s when this became a real issue within the scientific community. And it's just not caught on. And I think the reason why, you mentioned geopolitics at the start of the show, Greg. I mean, solving this problem is so at odds with the geopolitical dynamics of the world, right? Like the idea of slowing down and protecting the environment is at odds with the theater of global competition and growing your economy as fast as you can, growing your military as fast as you can, making yourself as mighty as possible to project your influence on the world. That is inherently an ideology that uses the climate as a resource to be extracted from and mined and used as a resource for your economic and military might. And that mindset is really what needs to change. So some people believe that, like, you can implement scientific solutions, but you're not going to fix human greed, and that's what's really the problem. I think there's a lot of debates as to whether this is a scientific issue or whether it's a cultural, spiritual issue, right? But we can dive into that. But I do think that ultimately for me, what it comes down to is this: when you have an economic system and a geopolitical military system that depends on infinite growth to sustain itself, like capitalism, which literally requires growth in order to prevent the house of cards from falling down. And that growth requires natural resources as an input. The climate crisis is a foregone conclusion. Climate change is just what's going to happen in that system. Eventually, the economy grows beyond the limits of what a finite planet can sustain. And that's what we're seeing now at a global level. We're seeing that the consequences of capitalism writ large on the global scale for hundreds of years. And now we're living in the point where we've pushed up against the boundaries of our planet, and we haven't figured out how to change the system. So we're just barreling forward in that direction. And we need to, I think, go beyond capitalism into a post-capitalist economic system where we don't require growth and extraction in order to actually solve these problems.
Yeah. This is why I am a big proponent of indigenous governance of the land. Like, we talk about indigenous exploitation, but only in the sense of, oh, we're stealing their land to exploit their resources. But also what we are deleting with genocide and the displacement of indigenous groups is that we're deleting their knowledge of how we should govern the land, all the way from the Native Americans to, the indigenous groups in Peru. Like they knew. The way I see indigenous peoples is they are scientists with thousands of years of research experience. I don't look at them as being, oh, this awesome, quaint little culture that's so cute. It's like, no, they're scientists, and they have thousands of years of research under their belt, and we should be listening to them. But what you're talking about how, like, capitalism is not sustainable for planet Earth. The question is, how are we sold that? And this is where we get into the tactics that have been used. One we talked about before the show is the use of we. We use the word we very loosely. So like when Donald Trump was able to sell the idea, hey, drill, baby, drill. And I would like to play this video that you made to go into that. But
drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill. It's the collective interest that we all have. We all have a collective interest in the expansion of our economy and bulldozing forest and exploitation, because, hey, things are going to get cheaper for us. And as we're learning, that's not happening. We were sold a scam, right? But also, I would like to ask, is that one way that industry can kind of curtail the facts about science is by the science. They will fund environmentalist groups and movements and then feed the public. Me and Greg were talking about this months back, that they will make us feel guilty. Like the onus is on us. The burden is on us, the consumer. We're not recycling enough plastic. We're not
carbon
driving
footprint, baby.
It's our carbon footprint. We're not buying recyclable bags. And it's like, y'all are the problem. You poor working class, you guys are destroying the environment because they want to escape the responsibility of what their factories do, what their productions do. So anyways, I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
I have so much to say about that. The carbon footprint was invented to remove the onus of climate change from the corporations who are doing the production that is destroying the planet. This is a production issue. This is not a consumption issue. Of course, changing the culture of consumption and moving away from a materialistic culture is absolutely a helpful thing. And I agree with everything you said about indigenous culture. They have so much to teach us. There's so much wisdom in indigenous communities that are effectively what they are, is stewards of the land. They have a reciprocal relationship with their natural environment in most indigenous cultures, and they believe that their role is to remain in relationship, and there's a give and take kind of cycle, and there's a circular nature of the way that they see the system that they live in. Whereas Western culture and capitalism is all about extraction. It's all one way. We take from here, we produce things, we make profit, line go up. It's a completely
And no, I don't want to interrupt. I just want to say the production issue is a really great example of both the points that you're making about indigenous stewardship and production issues. Is actually the Oklahoma Dust Bowl in the 1930s. Like, it didn't have to be that bad. They were planting the wrong crops. They weren't planting them in complementary formations or anything like that. And also, they didn't have, because they were poor farmers, access to the capital required to purchase different seeds and different plants and stuff like that. So
they destroyed the permaculture. They had no. They were not given any indigenous knowledge about how you cannot just extract nutrients out of the ground constantly year after year and killing the bacteria, killing the tilling the
the fields.
I'm going to be honest. I'll be a confession. I used to be an anti-environmentalist. I would say like 11 years ago, and the reason why was because of I saw it as hypocritical. Like, put the onus on us and not the people who own the factories. So I was like, you all environmentalists are full of shit. But then I met a man who changed my life, Darius Fisher, who is the producer of Kiss the Ground. I don't know if you saw it. Kiss the Ground was an environmental film. It's on Netflix or Prime about the permaculture, like the soil, the health of the soil, how it is such a neglected topic. We don't think about the health of the soil. We don't think about how the soil needs bacteria and fungus and all that. We just kill it with glyphosate and pesticides. And anyways, he changed my mind because I said, I think the environmentalists are full of shit. And he said, yes, they are, because a lot of these movements are bought up by big industry. I'm not about that. And then I termed it cosmetic environmentalism. It's you do it for cosmetics. And he changed my life. And I became an environmentalist after getting to know him, so.
Yeah.
This is a really important point you bring up, because I think a lot of conversations about climate change fixate too much on the amount of carbon in the atmosphere and the temperature problem, which is important, but it's only one sliver of the overall ecological crisis. Soil health being another big one that you just brought up, right? Biodiversity being another huge one. The amount of fresh water that we have being another big one. All of these things are connected into one system, and oftentimes in the climate movement, people talk so much about fossil fuels getting burned, and obviously, like, that's a problem, and that's what's changing the temperatures and the amount of heat that the air captures in our atmosphere. But if we simply remove carbon from the atmosphere and then continue the global capitalist economy as is otherwise, we're still going to have huge problems, because our lives depend on biodiversity. Our lives depend on having fresh water and healthy soil. We need it to grow our food. We need it to drink water and stay alive. And so simply fixating on the atmosphere thing, I think, is something the climate movement often gets wrong. And to go back to the point about lifestyle, this, I think, is a very bourgeois understanding of the climate problem, to think my personal choices are really what's gonna change things, and I'm just gonna get a metal straw, and I'm gonna have an electric vehicle, and I'm going to buy vintage clothing. Those are all fine things. I think that the lifestyle changes we can make are great, but oftentimes it's for an upper class. It's an upper class lifestyle.
That's why all that shit's expensive. Buying environmentally friendly clothing, it usually is marked up in price. It is a bourgeois industry when you think about it.
It is, and it feeds into the neoliberal idea that we are all individuals, and as individuals we can solve this problem, when ultimately this is a collective issue, and it's the production side of the issue that we really need to change, and that requires talking about policy, talking about actually regulating these corporations. It's talking about, is the goal of our society to make these corporate stock prices go up, or should we have a different goal, like ecological health and human well-being? And those questions only come into play when you toss out this idea that, like, as individual people with our own little consumption decisions, we can change things, and actually talk about the broader systems and the geopolitics of it all.
You see, I think basically Greta's fall from media grace is actually interesting to look at, because like, while she was like a teenager, she was talking about climate change and how we need to stop it. And then she connected it to capitalism, and then boom, done. No more interviews. And then when she connected capitalism to Palestine, it was like double done. So yeah, I mean, one of the things is, like, all of these things fit together, right? There's there's imperialism, there's environmental consequences from that, and when looking at these systems as a whole, to your earlier point, like, it's so complex. The human mind was not meant to basically have to deal with all these different data inputs, and also to kind of realize and internalize the fact that this is happening. And if you want a good book on like why we struggle to kind of come to terms with climate as an issue, I would recommend, The Great Derangement by Amitav Ghosh. He's an Indian novelist, and he talks about like how, in the first part, like why the modern novel struggles as an art form to describe and grapple with the concept of climate change, which is basically like the role of the uncanny. Like like what we're seeing now has only been, or what we might see in the future in the coming decades, is stuff like we have only been exposed to in like apocryphal biblical stories or science fiction movies with like 100-year storms and stuff. So it's really hard to see like, no, that this is our reality now. And when talking about it and talking about like these global systems of extraction or imperialism or whatever, basically you just have to go down to like meet people like where they're at. For me, it's water sovereignty in Texas. Like, and that is like in data centers, and that is the gateway. Data centers, while not the end all be all, there's just the tip of the freaking iceberg. Really, it's an entry point to understand the greater ecological and climate consequences, just like Palestine was the gateway or the start point for a lot of people understanding how U.S. global imperialism operates.
So. A great point. That's a really great point.
The links to colonialism are really important to touch on. Can we talk about that real quick?
Hell yeah.
Please do.
The reason when you have a capitalist economy like the Europeans invented in the UK with the Industrial Revolution, right? And it started to become about this big industrial production based economy. They kicked all of the peasants off their land and made them go work in industrial factories in the cities. That was, the beginning. It also led to the beginning of the labor movement, and here are these dynamics that Karl Marx started to describe back when he was, writing. You project that out over the next 100 years. The thing about this growth-based capitalist economy is that it requires some sort of outside, some sort of periphery to extract resources and labor from. Because in order to maximize profit, you have to push down your production costs and you have to push down your labor costs and get cheaper resources from somewhere, right? That is why capitalism and colonialism go so hand in hand, because colonialism allowed the European colonizers and those societies to go find an outside, a periphery to exploit for resources and for labor. And that is why the African continent, North American, South American continent became colonized ultimately was to sustain the geopolitical and economic competition between these European colonial powers who wanted to have the biggest economy, wanted to have the biggest military. And to do that, they needed to find the best places to get wood and lumber and iron and gold and copper and labor and slaves. And that allowed them to ultimately generate more profit for those big trading companies that were such sort of authors of colonialism and capitalism for the 100 years that they were in power, like infamously the East India Company. So the requirement for a periphery to extract resources from has always been an element of capitalism, even after the decolonization era in the 20th century, when a lot of these African nations fought for their liberation and they achieved liberation from colonialism. That's why we have all of these nation states now in these countries that used to be colonized. They still needed those resources and labor for cheap. And so ultimately, the way that the current version of capitalism is set up, it's not literal colonialism, like England and Spain are no longer occupying huge parts of the globe, but there is still a massive resource and labor drain from the global south to the global north. That relationship has never actually changed. And that's why these quote unquote developing countries never actually develop into the modern industrial countries that you see in places like Europe and the US. It's because they're being affected. They call it neocolonialism, right? These Western states use the IMF and the World Bank to keep these countries in debt and to keep the labor costs and the resource costs in these countries cheap. And that allows colonialism to continue into the modern age. And I think we need to understand, as people who live in the global north and in these sort of imperialist Western countries, that our lifestyles, even just a middle class lifestyle in the US, depends on a ton of resource extraction from the global south. And people don't love to hear that because it makes it feel like, oh, it's, you know, it's my fault that colonialism is happening. It's absolutely not your fault. But the way, like, we wouldn't have the stock market reaching all-time highs every day like it just did if this sort of neo-colonial relationship weren't set up. And so we need to ask ourselves, who is all of this growth and all of this profit and all of these high stock prices really for? Because ultimately, it's not for us. It's not for the working class. We are getting data centers in our backyard. We're getting our water systems drained to cool down data center servers. We're getting our oil fracked, especially in Central Texas, from our like land that we live on, and that causes fucking earthquakes. Like the environment, even in the global north, is being extracted from violently all of the time, and it's all feeding in to the profits for a handful of corporations, billionaires, and mega conglomerates that are effectively now running the world. And they see the earth as something to be extracted from and drained while they figure out, like, how do we cyber what do they call it, Neuralink ourselves,
transhuman, transhumanism.
How do we like stop being humans, stop aging, Neuralink ourselves, become cyborgs, and go colonize Mars, because we don't really need this Earth anymore once we've fracked it and drained as much water as we can. And like that's ultimately the ideology that is driving the world we live in today. And I think while people are waking up to that, which I think we finally are, I think the Epstein files really like did something. I think folks are like, wait, how do we change this thing? And climate is part of it. Colonialism is part of it. The Epstein class is part of it. The imperialism is part of it. It's all actually linked together.
And it's easy to kind of like make free associations. So like when you're talking about like colonialism a couple centuries ago, there is a point in time where all the maps had been discovered. You know, the Arctic had been surveyed. You know, the world Earth was round, and we knew where everything was for the most part. And that's when the great European powers were like, oh my God, there's only a finite, all these finite realms to dominate. So now we need to compete with each another for like the race for Africa, where you have like colonies from Italy to France, which still exist to this day. Like Angola's total friggin' gross debt to GDP ratio right now is 51 to 63% goes to like its debt, right, to its former colonial masters. But yes, it was this race, and we see the same kind of AI mania where all these venture capital firms are in competition with one each other to get as much like market share or like get as many like AI data centers and companies like up and running, because they're also competing with China and other like actors as well. It's just kind of like they're now competing within this closed loop of like finite resources, and it's like literally nothing has changed.
I feel like this is like a perfect point in the episode to add some levity to this. I saw this video yesterday and I thought it captures this whole dialogue perfectly. I'm gonna play this just to add levity.
Look at that. Whoa, it's beautiful, right? And if I clear cut it, I can make a 7% yield.
But then the forest will be gone.
And then use the profits to diversify your portfolio and start a fishing operation to take all the fish from the ocean.
But then there would be no fish.
But then use the 10% profit margin to build a power plant to burn the coal you mine where the forest used to be.
But then the air will be ruined too.
But business is better, and we'll use the useless land we logged and killed and sucked dry to build
affordable housing?
Chuck E. Cheese. Franchises. Applebee's, Starbucks, Dutch Bros, GameStop, Chipotle, Panda Express, Chipotle.
Wait, but without any clean water or green anywhere, what will people eat?
Chips.
But from where?
Somewhere else. And we'll just keep taking, and the profits will grow faster and faster,
No.
and it'll never stop. It's infinite. It's infinite. It's infinite.
No, it's not.
Why not?
Because the world isn't. You can't keep taking more and more when you've destroyed the only planet we have.
But what about growth?
Well, a system built on infinite growth just doesn't work in a finite world.
But if you can't keep getting more, what's the point?
Well, that's easy. It's to take care of what you have.
Oh, yeah.
I love those guys.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
great.
First time I've seen it. You know, what guys I also do love. I think like out of all the horrific videos we're seeing right now, the Canadian train operators engulfed in flames have been my favorite.
Wait, I haven't seen that.
Overtake.
It's just like, hey guys, we really need to get going, you know.
Gus here. This is getting a little scary.
Holy shit. Oh yeah, eh?
Okay, y'all need to hurry up here. Like seriously, we're encased in flames now.
Oh my God.
Insane.
Are they
Insane
okay?
video.
No, they're fine. It's just like kind of really chill, and in the Canadian accent, be like, okay, guys, we're seriously. So,
Do you know how they escaped? They escaped. They had to ditch the train. They literally had to run on foot to escape.
Whoa.
I mean, that's how bad it got afterwards. A few minutes after that video.
Yeah, so basically, I just really want to find a useful tension between like all the doomerism around climate, and I think like that's why you're great at articulating this, because like we're seeing like when I was doing video polls for this episode, it just came across like so many compilations of all these climate scientists being like, no, we're actually pretty cooked.
Without exaggeration, facing a trajectory and impacts that will obliterate the possibility of human civilization within, by the year 2100.
If we carry on the way we're going, I can't see this civilization lasting the end of this century. No chance, in my view.
So, and it keeps going on, but like what I keep hearing as a layman who's trying to like educate himself on this subject is we keep hearing like two time frames or two benchmarks of projections for like what climate collapse or climate change would look like in conjunction with the going to 2 degrees or 4 degrees Celsius, right? You have the 2050 benchmark and then the end of the century, and there's nothing going on really in terms of projections beyond the end of this century. So like when we're engaging in this conversation, like what is the significance of the 2050 benchmark and the end of the century benchmark?
Scientists, they're just trying to give you a measurable and standard way of understanding how things are going to change. And I think they sometimes make it harder to understand than they should. Ultimately, the question about 2050 is just like, how hot is it going to be, right? Is it going to be 1 degree warmer, 1 degree Celsius warmer than the pre-industrial baseline? Is it going to be 2 degrees Celsius warmer than the pre-industrial baseline? And they use the pre-industrial baseline because the Industrial Revolution is really when you start to see carbon emissions go like that. And like literally over if you look at a really long graph, it's truly like just suddenly, boom, straight line up. Now, yeah, the question is how hot is it going to get? Not is it getting hotter, just how hot is it going to get? For a long time, the UN was using 1.5 degrees Celsius as sort of an important benchmark, because over 1.5 degrees Celsius is when things started to get pretty wobbly in terms of the heat waves, the droughts, the floods, the fires, the climate disasters.
Are we there yet?
We are fast approaching it. We are now above. We're about 1.1, 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial baseline, and we are charging straight towards 1.5. There is no legitimate climate scientist now who believes we're not going to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. But that when the UN climate COP, they call it COP, negotiations started 30 years ago. We just did COP 30, so it's been 30 years of climate negotiations. They initially tried to negotiate everything based on avoiding that 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. We are absolutely exceeding it. The question now is it going to be 2? Is it going to be 2.5? Is it going to be 3? Or is it going to be some sort of runaway thing? Of course, the runaway thing is when you get videos like the one you opened the show with, which is like half of people are going to die in the next, like in 20 years, right? And that's like a really, really scary scenario. I don't love videos like that because I think they're way too passive in terms of their communication of our ability to actually change this, because
there's like a religious element to it. It's just like I'm choosing to live when everyone's going to die, and I'm just going to stay in the forest and just live out my life before the apocalypse happens. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to play that because those are real the University of Exeter collaborated on that, so
that's real.
But yeah, that it's real, but also a lot of these alarmist or just completely, I wouldn't call it climate grief or climate nihilism reports. They also exist to be like, hey, let's try and do something. So like when you see the numbers, you know, I'm wondering if like they're skewed at all in order to like wake people up.
There are some climate scientists who really do tell the most apocalyptic story possible because they really want to wake people up. I don't love that strategy because it just hasn't worked in the past. I think the idea that's saying, hey, we are completely fucked, we are all going to die, that is not a very motivating or inspiring sort of message that says, hey, like, let's get off of our asses and do something about it, right? And I think sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, sorry.
No. I was just going to say, like, I think a much better message is, first of all, this is a very serious issue. We need to be serious about how risky we are and how many people could be affected. And it's not just people, by the way. 70% of the world's biodiversity has already been wiped out. Like 70% of wild animals, wild animal populations have declined by 70% since pre-industrial baseline. That means we have 30% as many wild animals, bugs, critters as we did even just 50 to 100 years ago, which is crazy, by the way. People don't talk about that enough. Regardless, it's not just for humans that we need to fix this, right? It's for all living species. That said, I think a much better communication method for the climate movement and the anti-imperial movement and all of these movements that are interconnected is imagine the world we could build instead of this bullshit that we have now, right? Because if we fix this, it actually opens up what I think is a pretty utopian vision for what society could be. Because it's not like things are going super well for working class people around the world, whether you're in the global north or the south. And we actually have everything we need to live an abundant life and live and build an economy that delivers good lives and abundance for everyone at even less resource consumption than we use now, because we make so much shit that we don't need.
And it's more affordable.
And it'll be more affordable. Exactly. If there isn't this pressure to keep growing, keep buying, keep consuming, having more things, having 10 cars, having 20 cars, like if we remove that pressure and that requirement for the stock market to always go up, all of that, right? Like we can actually say, oh wait, what? Like we have everything we need to live amazing lives on this planet and to sustain it for 7, 20, 50 generations to come. So to me, it's actually really exciting to talk about what that world could look like. Of course, you have to be antagonistic towards certain things: imperialism, capitalism, racism, genocide, colonialism. But at the same time, like, what is a world without those things? It's actually really nice. It's a really good world. You can imagine, like, sorry,
you boys ever seen Star Trek? But
well, okay, so it's great points. I because I'm the Fox Mulder on this show, I see 3 major rhetorical social engineering methods that have been used in the past few decades to try and prevent us from coming to that realization that you just outlined, right? One is the doomerism, right? We're doomed. What does that do? It completely makes you impotent, puts you in a nihilistic attitude, and then you just kind of adopt this mentality that for the rest of my life, I'm just going to consume and live my life to the fullest and fuck all, right? The next one is denial. We're denying it even exists, or we're selling the fact that, hey, this environmental destruction is going to make life more affordable for you. It means more profit margins. Therefore, you share that profit margins, right? The next one is just it's kind of like I guess it's like a spiritual bypassing is a great way to put it, where we just kind of see this earth and this planet as just one stepping stone to the next life. So we don't have to worry about what happens to it here. So those 3 rhetorical strategies have been used to brainwash the working class. Now, this brings up the next point I'm going to bring up might be a little controversial in your eyes, but I think it should be discussed. I can honestly say that I have a bias and I'm a simp for China in many ways. Now, China's environmental policies have not been perfect, no doubt, right? But we are seeing the beginnings of a mentality that you can make life affordable. You can innovate using modern technology to steer the economic growth into a socialist one that does incorporate environmental factors into it. For example, the de-desertification of China that they're doing right now, where they basically, I'm going to pull up some stats real quick that I saw. It was they planted over 70 billion trees since 2000, and increased its forest cover from 16% to over 24% in an area larger than the U.S. state of Texas. It has the 3 North Shelter Belt, the Great Green Wall. It's fixed over 60 million hectaacres of desertified land. And of course, they're using technology to monitor environmental factors way more efficiently than we are. So China is, in my opinion, and I just want to know yours, it does appear that they're steering the long-term benefits of taking care of the environment through their economy and industries. It's not perfect. It is very taxing on the environment, but I just want to hear your opinion on it.
Well, just real quick, they are still the world's largest coal polluter by a massive
Absolutely.
margin.
Absolutely, they are. But you got to mind you, it's over 1 billion people that they have to generate the electricity for. The question is not what they're doing now or how bad it is now. The question is, where are they steering things? Like, where is their trajectory? They think in long term now. The CPC is long term minded. They're not short term, as opposed to us. We're very short term minded. You know, quick profits, fuck all, whatever you destroy in the wake. So, but I would like to get your opinion on this, Michael.
Yes, I lean team Mark on this one in the sense of I think China's doing a really good job on climate. I think, look, here's a stat. 80% of the world's new renewable energy capacity each year is in China. That means that they're creating 4 times what the rest of the world combined. They're adding 4 times more than the rest of the world combined in terms of solar energy to their grid every year. Insane gap between China and the rest of the world on renewable energy. Now, look, are there issues with China? Absolutely. It is important to note that China is, by all looks of it, an imperial country that wants to dominate its region and the world, and it's an imperial competition with the United States, right? It also, I think, has a much better understanding of ecology and the long term, like Mark, you just said. And I would argue that this might be glazing China a little bit too much, but I would argue that if they weren't in military and geopolitical competition with the insane capitalist, imperialist, violent empire that is the United States, that they probably wouldn't be burning so much coal. But they need to stay in competition with the U.S. and they realize that it's an existential threat for them, right?
That's the misunderstanding amongst purists, right? The purist will point out, oh, well, look, they're not completely cutting out all carbon footprint or whatever. But it's like, you have to put yourself in the shoes of China. How do I survive against this monster that's trying to destroy me and the world and compete with me and just crush me economically? How do I compete with that and also have a long-term goals of taking care of my population in every sense? Meaning, not just the Chinese government has figured out, like, we can't just take care of people by having them make more money. We need to take care of them in every sense of the word. Meaning, if they're breathing in pollution, well, that's going to lead to a deteriorating health in our deteriorating healthy population in the future. We have less, viable young adults who are living healthy to guide the future of China. And then you just see the innovation. Like, I'm sure you've heard the story about the solar farm in the desert. They wound up putting a bunch of solar panels, and then weeds kept growing up. So they had to bring in sheep to graze, and then those sheep started spreading more seeds. And then inadvertently, they had caused a blooming of the desert. And then China took note of that, and they jotted it down and started expanding on that concept. Like, I saw a video where they were taking basically hay, and they were checkering the desert with hay. And it's ingenious because that's actually an indigenous method that they would use, that the indigenous cultures used to do, to make sure that the rainwater does not just wash away, it stays collected, and then it starts to grow, a biomass of some type, whether that be like weeds or plants or whatever, fungus, mold, and then that would create a whole new ecosystem of itself. And you keep doing that, you can reverse a lot of, you can at least cool the planet, because it's called I'm sure you've heard this term. It's called evapotranspiration. So planting trees literally cools the planet because it absorbs when you have the water that's being soaked in from the roots and expiring from the plant leaves. that has a cooling effect. Now you exponentially grow that by 1 billion. What do you have? You will have a cooling effect of some kind. So I don't know. Maybe that's all fringe science, but it's stuff that I've been looking into.
No, but I mean, this is why I oftentimes, if people ask me if I have a political ideology, I do describe myself as an eco-socialist, which I think is ultimately something that has become more and more the direction of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, I do think that the issue with the Chinese Communist Party is that they are the primary agent of that country. If you're not a member of the Chinese Communist Party and you're in China, you don't have a lot of say in the direction of your society, which is, I think, a problem. But that said, I don't know if you've heard about this tenet of the ideology of the CCP, which is called ecological civilization. Highly recommend you look it up if you haven't read it. But it's a articulation of civilization and society in right relationship with ecology in a way that, like, the improvement of the environment and the environmental situation is actually required and necessary for the flourishing of human civilization, right? And it's in all of these flourishing language that is typical of the CCP ideology. But I think it's actually, like, really cool that they have written that down and said this is part of our ideology, that, like, ecology is a necessary tenet of human flourishing. Now, what this ultimately looks like, I think that China actually really is a great thing to talk about for a minute, because it articulates and I think hammers home the point that feels so clear to me about why capitalism and ecology don't really go well together. In fact, they're antithetical to each other. But that is that in China, because they're not capitalist, or at least that, people say, oh, China is capitalist. Well, no, they use markets, but they don't require that profit be the main goal of society. When profit isn't the main goal, it allows you to do things like what you're talking about, like these huge investments into public infrastructure and into solar energy, even though it might be more profitable to frack for natural gas and burn coal. In the US, whatever is more profitable is the obvious thing to do, because that's how capitalism works. In China, they are able to mobilize huge productive capacity to generate long-term infrastructure, whether it's their high-speed rail, their solar energy grids, the things that they think that they need in 10 years, not just next quarter, even though they might not be more profitable. And that's because their society is not governed by the capitalist law of value that says that capital needs to go to the most profitable thing in the immediate term. And ultimately, this makes the US system kind of look outdated, because we know what we need to do to solve climate change. We know we need more renewable energy. We know we need better public transportation. We know we need to consume less things, that we need to have products that don't, like crap out after a few years, because it's more profitable to sell them that way. We know that we need to have more affordable housing and better healthcare and plant more trees and restore the environment. It's not like we haven't figured out the climate solutions. We know what we need to do, but we can't do them in the States because they're not profitable. Whereas in China, they can mobilize huge amounts of productive capacity towards things that aren't necessarily the most profitable option in the near term. And that's ultimately why I think a more socialist model is better fit for an ecological civilization. And that's why I advocate for post-capitalism in the States. Yeah.
Or just a civilization, period. Because like that's what we're trying to keep. And like our system, like when it comes to like providing for our people or taking care of the environment or whatever, it is comically stupid. So you're talking about like high-speed rail, sustainable transportation between cities. Well, we can't do that because our priority is to have Northrop Grumman, who designs and produces the B-2 bomber, do Moon Train. Here we go, everybody. The Lunar Railroad. Okay. Here's the DARPA 10-year lunar architecture contract. We've got deciding a railroad on the moon. Like, this was a but this is a massive contract they had. Absolutely just shows you where our government priorities are, which is just like militarism, and it's comical at this point. There's no way But like, so my question is, when you advocate for post-capitalism, and you're challenged because like we are told to think in like we've been conditioned, especially in the West, to think in binary ways that like people in Russia or China don't really think in the same binary ways that we've been conditioned to. So it's like I have a problem with capitalism, and knee-jerk reactions like, oh, so you're a commie? You have communism? You like authoritarian states where people just die of massive famines, like Stalin and the Holodomor? Like that's what you get. So like when you're describing or championing this post-capitalist world, and you get challenged, like how do you explain that? Your vision, or to get people starting to think some way on side?
Yeah, I think that you immediately need to push back against this like Cold War mentality of, is it so